Good afternoon, good morning, and good night. Peace be with you, and happy Mother's Day. Today we are reading chapter 20 of So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. We'll probably read more than that, but starting on chapter 20. The purpose of having the sun go low in the evenings, in the summer, especially in parks, said a voice earnestly, is to make girls' breasts bob up and down more clearly to the eye. I am convinced that this is the case. Arthur and Fenchurch giggled about this to each other as they passed. She hugged him more tightly for a moment. And I'm certain, said the frizzy, ginger-haired youth with the long, thin nose who was expostulating from his deck chair by the side of the Serpentine, that if one worked the argument through, one would find that it flowed with perfect naturalness and logic from everything. He insisted to his thin, dark-haired companion, who was slumped in the next-door deck chair, feeling dejected about his spots, that Darwin was going to add on about. This is certain. This is indisputable. And, he added, I love it. He turned sharply and squinted through his spectacles at Fenchurch. Arthur steered her away. Next guess, she said, when she had stopped giggling. Come on. I'm going to try to do accents here, okay? All right, he said. Your left elbow. There's something wrong with your left elbow. Wrong again, she said. Completely wrong. You're on completely the wrong track. The summer sun was sinking through the trees in the park, looking as if, let's not mince words, Hyde Park is stunning. Everything about it is stunning, except for the rubbish on Monday mornings. Hyde Park on a summer's evening and not feel moved. Anyone who can go through Hyde Park on a summer's evening and not feel moved by it is probably going through an ambulance in with a sheet pulled over his face. It is a park in which people do more extraordinary things than they do elsewhere. Arthur and Fenchurch found a man in shorts practicing the bagpipes to himself under a tree. The piper paused to chase off an American couple who had tried, timidly, to put some coins on the box as bagpipes came in. No, he shouted. Go away! I'm only practicing! He started resolutely to reinflate his bag, and even the noise this made could not disfigure their mood. Arthur put his arms around her and moved them slowly downward. I don't think it can be your bottom, he said after a while. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that at all. Yes, she agreed. There is absolutely nothing wrong with my bottom. They kissed for so long that eventually the piper went and practiced on the other side of the tree. I'll tell you a good story, said Arthur. Good. They found a patch of grass which was relatively free of couples actually lying on top of each other, and sat and watched the stunning ducks in the low sunlight rippling on the water which ran beneath the stunning ducks. A story, said Fenchurch, cuddling his arm to her, which will tell something of the sort of things that happened to me. It's absolutely true. True story. You know, sometimes people tell you stories that are supposed to be something that happened to their wife's cousin's best friend, but actually probably got made up somewhere along the line. Well, it's like one of those stories, except that it actually happened, and I know it actually happened, because the person in it actually happened to was me. Like the raffle ticket, Arthur laughed. Yes, I had a train to catch. I arrived at the station. Did I ever tell you, interrupted Fenchurch, what happened to my parents in the station? Yes, said Arthur. You did. Just checking. Arthur glanced at his watch. I suppose we could think of getting back, he said. Tell me the story, said Fenchurch firmly. You arrived at the station? I was about 20 minutes early. I got the time of the train wrong. I suppose it is at least equally possible, he added after a moment's reflection, that British Rail had got the time of the train wrong. Hadn't occurred to me before. Get on with it, Fenchurch laughed. So I bought a newspaper to do the crossword and went to the buffet to get a cup of coffee. You do the crossword? Yes. Which one? The Guardian, usually. I think it tries to be too cute. I prefer the Times. Did you solve it? What? The crossword in the Guardian. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, said Arthur. I'm still trying to buy the coffee. All right then, buy the coffee. I'm buying it. I am also, said Arthur, buying some biscuits. What sort? Rich tea. Good choice. I like them. Laden with all these new possessions, I'd go and sit at the table. And don't ask me what the table was like, because this was some time ago and I can't remember. It was probably around. All right. So let me give you the layout. Me sitting at the table, on the left the newspaper, on my right the cup of coffee. In the middle of the table, the packet of biscuits. I see it perfectly. What you don't see, said Arthur, because I haven't mentioned him yet, is the guy sitting at the table already. He's sitting there opposite me. What's he like? Perfectly ordinary. Briefcase, business suit. He didn't look, said Arthur, as if he was about to do anything weird. Ah, I know the type. What did he do? He leaned across the table, picked up the pack of biscuits, tore it open, took one out, and what? What? Ate it. What? He ate it. Fenchurch looked at him in astonishment. What on earth did he do? Well, in the circumstances, I did what any red-blooded Englishman would do. I was compelled, said Arthur, to ignore it. What? Why? Well, it's not the sort of thing you've trained for, is it? I searched my soul and discovered that there was nothing anywhere in my upbringing, experience, or even primal instincts to tell how to react to someone who was quite simply, calmly, sitting right there in front of me, stolen one of my biscuits. Well, you could... Fenchurch thought about it. I say, I'm not sure what I would have done either. What happened? I stared furiously at the crossword, said Arthur. Couldn't do a single clue. Took a sip of coffee. It was too hot to drink, so there was nothing for it. I braced myself. I took a biscuit, trying very hard not to notice. Yeah, I did. That the packet was already mysteriously open. But you're fighting back. Taking a tough line. After my fashion, yes, I ate the biscuit. I did very deliberately and visibly, so that you have no doubt as to what I was doing when I ate a biscuit, said Arthur. It stays eaten. So what did he do? Took another. Honestly, insisted Arthur. This is exactly what happened. He took another biscuit. He ate, clear as day, certain as we were sitting on the ground. Fenchurch stirred uncomfortably. And the problem was, said Arthur, that having not said anything that first bite, it was somehow even more difficult to broach the subject the second time around. What do you say? Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing. Doesn't work. No, I ignored it with, if anything, even more vigor than previously. My man stared at the crossword again, still couldn't budge a bit of it. So showing some of the spirit of Henry V did on St. Crispin's Day. What? I went into the breach again. I took, said Arthur, another biscuit, and for an instant our eyes met. Like this? Well, no, not quite like that. Like this? Not quite like that. But they met, just for an instant, and we looked away. But I'm here to tell you, said Arthur, that there was a little electricity in the air. There was a little tension building up over the table at about this time. I can imagine. We went through the whole packet like this. Him, me. The whole packet? Well, it was only 8 biscuits, and it seemed like a lifetime of biscuits we were getting through at this point. Gladiators could hardly have had a tougher time. Gladiators, said Fenchurch, would have had to do it in the sun. More physically grueling. There's that. So, when the empty packet was lying dead between us, the man at last got up, having done his worst, and left. I heaved a sigh of relief, of course. As it happened, my train was announced a moment or two later, so I finished my coffee, stood up, picked up the newspaper, and underneath the newspaper, yes, were my biscuits. What? Said Fenchurch. What? True. No! She gasped and tossed herself back on the grass, laughing. She sat up again. You complete nimwit, she hooted. You almost completely and utterly foolish person. She pushed him backward, rolled over him, kissed him, and rolled off. He was surprised at how late she was. Now you tell me a story. I thought, she said, putting on a low voice, that you were very keen to get back. No hurry, he said airily. I want you to tell me a story. She looked over the lake and pondered. All right, she said. It's only a short one. Not funny like yours. But, anyway. She looked down. Arthur could feel it was one of those sorts of moments. The air seemed to stand still around them, waiting. Arthur wished that the air would go away and mind its own business. When I was a kid, she said, These sorts of stories always start like this, don't they? When I was a kid. Anyway, this is a bit when a girl suddenly says, when I was a kid, and starts to unbutton herself. We have got to that bit. Well, when I was a kid, I had this picture hanging over the foot of my bed. What do you think of it so far? I like it. It's moving well. You're getting the bedroom interest in nice and early. We could probably do with some development with the picture. It was one of those pictures that children are supposed to like, she said, but don't. Full of endearing little animals doing endearing things, you know? I know. I was plagued with them too. Rabbits and waistcoats. Exactly. These rabbits were in fact on a raft, as were assorted rabbits and owls. There may even have been a reindeer on the raft. And a boy was sitting on the raft. Among the rabbits and waistcloths, and the owls and the reindeer, precisely there, a boy of a cheery gypsy ragamuffin variety. Oh, the picture worried me, I must say. There was an otter swimming in front of the raft, and I used to lie awake at night worrying about this otter having to pull a raft, and with all these wretched animals on it who shouldn't even be on a raft. And the otter had such a thin tail to pull it, and I thought it must have hurt him pulling it all the time. Worried me, not badly, but just vaguely, all the time. Then one day, and remember I'd been looking at this picture every night for years, I suddenly noticed that the raft had a sail. I'd never seen it before. The otter was fine. He was just swimming along. She shrugged. Good story? She said. Ends weakly, said Arthur. Leaves the audience crying, yes, but what of it? Fine up till there, but needs a final sting before the credits. Fenchurch laughed and hugged her legs. It was just such a sudden revelation. Years of almost unnoticed worry just dropping away, like taking off heavy weights. Like black and white becoming color, like a dry stick suddenly being watered. The sudden shift of perspective that says, put away your worries. The world is a good and perfect place. It is in fact very easy. You probably think I'm saying this because I'm going to tell you that I failed it this afternoon or something, don't you? Well, said Arthur. His composure suddenly shattered. Well, it's all right, she said. I did. That's exactly what I felt. But you see, I felt this before. Even stronger. Incredibly strongly. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a one, she said, gazing off into the distance for a sudden startling revelation. Oh, wait a minute. She said, gazing off into the distance for sudden startling revelations. Arthur was at tea, could hardly speak, and felt it wiser, therefore, for the moment, not to try. It was very odd, she said, much as one of the pursuing Egyptians might say, might have said it, that the behavior of the Red Sea when Moses waved his rod, as it was a little on the strange side. Very odd, she repeated. For days, the strangest feeling had been burdening me, as if I was going to give birth. Hello, we are back. Sorry for the little cut there. I realized I was recording in 4K, 60 frames per second, so it took up a lot more space. So whoopsies. So welcome back to 30 frames per second, HD quality, no 4K. Hope you like it. We were in the middle of chapter, I don't know, but we were right here, right? So I'm just going to start. We were just talking about Moses parting the Red Sea. And Fenchurch is going on about her story. Very odd, she repeated. For days before, the strangest feeling had been building in me, as if I was going to give birth. No, it wasn't like that, in fact. It was more as if I was being connected into something, bit by bit. No, not even that. It was as if the whole of the earth, through me, was going to... That's the number! Arthur gently. 42. Meant anything to you at all? What? No, what are you talking about? Explained Fenchurch. It's just a thought, murmured Arthur. Arthur, I mean this. This is very real to me. This is serious. I was being perfectly serious, said Arthur. It's just the universe I'm never quite sure about. What do you mean about it? What do you mean by that? Tell me the rest of it, he said. Don't worry if it sounds odd. Believe me, you are talking to somebody who has seen a lot of stuff, he added. That is odd. I don't mean biscuits. She nodded and seemed to believe him. Suddenly she gripped his arm. It was so simple, she said. So wonderfully and extraordinarily simple. When it came, what was it? Said Arthur quietly. Arthur, you see, she said. That's what I no longer know. And the loss is unbearable. If I try to think back to it, it all goes flickery and jumpy. And if I try too hard, I get as far as the teacup and I just black out. What? Well, like your story, she said. The best bit happened in the cafe. I was sitting there having a cup of tea. This was after days of this build-up, this feeling of becoming connected up. I think I was buzzing gently. And there was some work going on at that building site posed opposite the cafe. And I was watching it through the window over the rim of my teacup, which I always find the nicest way of watching other people working. And suddenly, there it was in my mind, this message from somewhere. And it was so simple, it made such sense of everything. I just sat right up and thought, oh, well, that's all right then. I was so startled that I almost dropped my teacup. In fact, I think I did drop it. Yes, she added thoughtfully. I'm sure I did. How much sense am I making? It was fine, up until the bit about the teacup. She shook her head, shook it again, as if trying to clear it, which is what she was trying to do. Well, that's it, she said. Fine up to that bit about the teacup. This was the point at which seemed to me literally as if the world exploded. What? I know it sounds crazy, and everyone says it was hallucination, but if that was a hallucination, then I have hallucinations in big screen 3D with 16-track Dolby stereo, and should probably hire myself out to some people who are bored with shark movies. It was as if the ground was literally ripped from under my feet. And, she patted the grass lightly, as if for reassurance, and then seemed to change her mind about what she was going to say, and I woke up in a hospital. I suppose I've been in and out ever since, and that's why I have an instinctive nervousness, she said, of sudden startling revelations that everything is going to be all right. She looked up to him. Arthur had simply ceased to worry himself about the strange anomalies surrounding his return into his homeworld, or rather, had consigned them to that part of his mind marked things to think about, urgent. Here is the world, he had told himself. Here, for whatever reason, is the world, and here it stays, with me on it. But now it seemed to go swimming around him, as it had that night in the car when Fenchurch's brother had told him that silly story of the CIA agent in the reservoir. The French embassy went silly. The Sheraton Tower Hotel and the Bank of Abu Dhabi went swimming. The trees went swimming. The lake went swimming. But this was perfectly natural and nothing to be alarmed at because a gray goose had just landed on it. The geese were having a great relaxed time and had no major answers. They wished to know the questions to. Anyway, said Fenchurch, suddenly and brightly, and with a wide-eyed smile, there is something wrong with part of me, and you've got to find out what it is. We'll go home. Arthur shook his head. What's the matter? She said. Arthur had shaken his head, not to disagree with her suggestion, which he thought was truly an excellent one of the world's greatest suggestions, but because he was just for a moment trying to free himself of the recurring impression he had that just when he was least expecting it, the universe would suddenly leap out from behind the door and go, boo, at him. I'm trying to get this entirely clear in my head, said Arthur. You say you felt as if the earth actually exploded. Yes, more than felt. Which is what everyone says, he said hesitantly. His hallucinations? Yes, but, Arthur, that's ridiculous. People think that if you just say hallucinations, it explains everything you want to explain away, and eventually whatever it is you can't extend will just go away. It's just a word. It doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain why the dolphins disappeared. No, said Arthur. No, he added thoughtfully. No. He added again, even more thoughtfully. What? He said at last. Doesn't explain the dolphins disappearing. What do you mean? Which dolphins? I'm talking about all the dolphins disappeared. I said, no, said Arthur, I see. Which dolphins do you mean? What do you mean, which dolphins? I'm talking about when all the dolphins disappeared. She put her hand on his knee, which made him realize that the tingling going up and down his spine was not her gently stroking his back, and must instead be one of those nasty, creepy feelings he so often got when people were trying to explain things to him. Disappeared? Yes. The dolphins? Yes. All the dolphins, said Arthur. Disappeared? Yes. The dolphins. You're saying the dolphins all disappeared. Is this, said Arthur, trying to be absolutely clear on the point, what you're saying. Arthur, where have you been? For heaven's sake, the dolphins all disappeared on the same day She stared at him intently in his startled eyes. What? No dolphins. All gone. Vanished. She searched her face. Did you really not know that? It was clear from his startled expression that he did not. Where did they go? He asked. No one knows. That's what vanished means. She paused. Well, there is one man who says he knows about it. But everyone says he lives in California, she said, and is mad. I was thinking of going to see him because it seems the only lead I've got on what happened to me. She shrugged, and then looked at him long and quietly. She laid her hand on the side of his face. I really would like to know where you've been, she said. I think something terrible happened to you as well then. And that's why we recognize each other. She glanced around the park, which was now being gathered into the clutches of dusk. Well, she said, now you've got someone you can tell. Arthur slowly let out a long year of a sigh. It is, he said, a very long story. Fenchurch leaned across him and drew him over her canvas bed. Is there anything to do with this? She said. The thing she took out of the bag was battered and travel-worn, as if it had been hurled into prehistoric rivers, baked under the sun that shines so readily on the deserts of Kafroon, half buried in the marbled sands that fringe the heady vapored oceans of Sangretinus V. Sangretinus 5. Frozen on the glaciers of the moon of Jaglan Beta, sat on, kicked around in spaceships, scuffed and gently abused, and since its makers had thought that these were exactly the sorts of things that might happen to it, they were thoughtfully encased in a sturdy plastic cover and written on it, in large friendly letters, the words, "Don't panic." Where did you get this? Said Arthur, startled, taking it from her. Ah, she said, I thought it was yours. In Russell's car that night. I dropped it. Have you been to many of these places? Arthur drew the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from his cover. It was like a small, thin, flexible lamp computer. He tapped some buttons till the screen flared with text. A few, he said. Can we go? What? No, said Arthur abruptly, then relented wearily. Do you want to? He said, hoping for an answer no. It was an act of great generosity on his part not to say. You don't want to, do you? Which expects it. Yes, she said. I want to know what the message was that I lost, and where it came from. Because I don't think, she added, standing up and looking around the increasing gloom of the park, that it came from here. I'm not even sure, she added, slipping her arm around Arthur's waist, that I know where he is. Alright, that was chapter 20. We might as well do chapter 21. Chapter 21. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is, as it has been remarked before often and accurately, a pretty startling kind of thing. It is, essentially, as the title implies, a guidebook. The problem is, or rather one of the problems, for there are so many, a sizable number of which are continually clogging up the civil, commercial, and criminal courts in all the areas of the galaxy, and especially, where possible, the more corrupt ones. The previous sentence makes sense. That is not the problem. This is. Change. Read it through again and you'll get it. The galaxy is rapidly changing place. There is, frankly, so much of it, every bit of which is continually on the move, continually changing. A bit of a nightmare, you might think, for a scrupulous and conscientious editor diligently striving to keep this massively detailed and complex electronic tomb abreast of all the changing circumstances and conditions that the galaxy throws up every minute of every hour of every day. And you would be wrong. Where you would be wrong would be in failing to realize that the editor, like all the editors the guide has ever had no real grasp of the meaning of the word scrupulous, conscientious, and diligent, and tend to get his nightmares through a straw. Entries tend to get updated or not across the sub-Ethernet according to if they read good. Take, for example, the case of Braquinda on the Thoth of Avalars, famed in myth, legend, and stupefying dome, tried ministries, as homes of the magnificent and magical Fulornis Fire Dragon. In ancient days before the advent of the Sorth of Bragadox, when Fragilus sang and Sax Queen of the Quinalox held sway, when the air was sweet and the night fragrant, and they all somehow managed to be, or they so claimed, through how on earth they could have thought that anyone was even remotely likely to believe such a pretentious claim, was what was all the sweet air and fragrant nights and whatnot is anyone's guess. Virgins. They were all virgins. It was not possible to heave a brick on Bequinda and the Froth of Avalars without hitting at least half a dozen Fulornis fire dragons. Whether you would want to do that is another matter. Not that fire dragons were an essentially peace-loving species, because they were. They adored the bits, and this wholesale adoring of things to bits was often in itself the problem. One so often hurts the one one loves, especially if one is a Fulornis fire dragon, with breath like a rocket booster and teeth like a park fence. Another problem was that once they were in the mood, they often went on to hurt quite a lot of ones that other people loved as well. Add to that all the relatively small number of madmen who actually went around the place heaving bricks, and you end up with a lot of people on Bequinda and the Froth of Avalars getting seriously hurt by dragons. But did they mind? They did not. Were they heard to bemoan their fate? No. The Fulornis fire dragons were revered throughout the lands of Bequinda and the Froth of Avalars for their savage beauty, their noble ways, and their habit of biting people who didn't revere them. Why was this? The answer was simple. Sex. There is, for an unfathomable reason, something almost unbearably sexy about having huge fire-breathing magical dragons flying low over the sky on moonlit nights, which were already dangerous on the sweet and fragrant side. Why this should be so? The romance-besotted people of Bequinda and the Froth of Avalars could not have told you, and would not have stopped to discuss the matters once the effect was up and going. For no sooner would a flock of half a dozen silk-winged, leather-bodied Fulornis fire dragons heave into the sight across the evening horizon that half the people of Bequinda were scurrying off into the woods with the other half. They were to spend a busy, breathless night together, and emerge with the first rays of dawn all smiling and happy, and still claiming, rather endearingly, to be virgins, if rather flustered and sticky virgins. Pheromones, some researchers said. Something sonic, others claimed. The place was always stiff with researchers trying to get to the bottom of it all, and taking a very long time about it. Not surprisingly, the guide's graphically enticing description of the general state of affairs of this planet had proved to be astonishingly popular among hitchhikers who allowed themselves to be guided by it. And so it has simply never been taken out, and it therefore left to latter-date travelers to find out for themselves that today's modern-day Bequinda and the city-state of Avalars is now little more than concrete, strip joints, and dragon burger bars. Sad. Alright, chapter 22. The night in Islington was sweet and fragrant. There were, of course, no Fulornis fire dragons about in the alley, but if any had chanced by, they might have just well slopped off across the road for pizza, for they were not going to be needed. Had an emergency cropped up while they were still in the middle of their pizza with extra anchovies, they could always have sent across a message to put Dire Straits on the stereo, which is now known to have much of the same effect. No, said Fenchurch, not yet. Arthur put Dire Straits on the radio. Fenchurch pushed ajar the upstairs front door to let in a little more of the sweet, fragrant night air. They both sat on some of the furniture made out of cushions, very close to the bottom of the champagne. No, said Fenchurch, not till you found out what's wrong with me. Which bit? But I suppose, she added, fairly quietly, that we may as well start with where your hand is now. Arthur said, so which way do I go? Down, said Fenchurch, on this occasion. He moved his hand. Down, she said. And in fact, the other way. Oh, yes. Mark Knopfer had an extraordinary ability to make a Schecter custom Stratocaster hoot and sing like angels on the Saturday night, exhausted from being good all week and needing a stiff drink, which is not strictly relevant at this point, since the record hadn't yet got to that bit, but there will be too much else going on when it does, and furthermore, the chronicler does not intend to sit here with the checklist and stopwatch, so it seems best to mention it now while things are still moving slowly. And so we come, said Arthur, to your knee. There's something terribly tragically wrong with your left knee. My left knee, said Fenchurch, is absolutely fine. So it is. Do you know what? What? Oh, that's all right. I can tell you do. No, keep going. So it has something to do with your fate. She smiled in the dim light and wriggled her shoulders noncommittally against the cushions, since there are cushions in this universe. On Scornachelis Beta, to be exact, 2 worlds in from the swampland of the mattresses that actively enjoy being wriggled against, particularly if it's non-committally, because of the syncopated way in which their shoulders move. It's a pity they weren't there. They weren't, but such is life. Arthur held her left foot in his lap and looked it over carefully. All kinds of stuff about the way her dress fell away from her legs was making it difficult for him to think particularly clearly at this point. I have to admit, he said, that I really don't know what I'm looking for. You know when you find it, she said. Really, you will. There was a slight catch in her voice. It's not that one. Feeling increasingly puzzled, Arthur let her foot down on the ground and moved around so that he could take her right foot. She moved forward, put her arms around him, and kissed him, because the record had got to that bit, which, if you knew the record, you would have made it impossible not to do this. You would know, made it impossible not to do this. Then she gave him her right foot. He stroked it, ran his fingers around her ankle, under her toes, along her instep. Could find nothing wrong with it. She watched him with great amusement, laughed, and shook her head. No, stop, she said, but it's not that one now. Arthur stopped and frowned at her left foot on the floor. Don't stop. He stroked her right foot, ran his fingers around her ankle, under her toes, along her instep, and said, You mean it's something to do with which leg I'm holding? She did another of the shrugs, which would have brought such joy into the life of a simple cushion from Scorchalis Beta. He frowned. Pick me up, she said quietly. He let her right foot down on the floor and stood up. So did she. He picked her up in his arms and they kissed again. This went on for a while. Then she said, Now put me down again. Still puzzled, he did so. Well, she looked at him almost challengingly. So what's wrong with my feet? She said. Arthur did not understand. He sat on the floor, then got down on his hands and knees to look at her feet. In situ, his hands and knees to look at her feet, in situ, as it were, in their normal habitat. And as he looked closely, something odd struck him. He put his head right down to the ground and peered. There was a long pause. He sat back heavily. Yes, he said. I see what's wrong with your feet. They don't touch the ground. So? What you think? Arthur looked up at her quickly and saw the deep apprehension making her eyes suddenly dark. She bit her lip and was trembling. What do... she stammered. Are you... She shook the hair forward over her eyes that were filling with dark, fearful tears. He stood up quickly, put his arms around her, and gave her a single kiss. Perhaps you can do what I can do, he said, and walked straight out the upstairs front door. The record got to the good bit. Well, we'll stop there. Heating up. Good love story. I like it. Anyway. Peace be with you. Have a blessed night. I hope you enjoyed. Jesus loves you. That's really all I gotta say. Have a great night.